so, what is the best-selling computer in all of history?
Believe it or not, the $595 Commodore 64 is the best-selling computer system of all time, with sales of about 17 million systems.
Oh my goodness, have I seen a resurgence of interest in old 8-bit computers. I would guess around 2010 is when the first seeds of it started to pop up and be seen. You do have a couple of weirdos like me that never really stopped using the 8-bits. There was no point at which I've not had a Commodore computer hooked up since the early 80s. I was born in 1971. As a kid, I used to like to take electronic things apart and try and figure out how they work. This was actually a doable thing in the late 70s. The little middle school that I went to had a computer lab, and it was full of Commodore 4032 PETs. And I was absolutely amazed from the first moment that I saw them, especially when one of the other kids who was a little more in the know, he would hit the stop key to stop one of the games we were playing and show that you could actually list the code from these games and change it. And that was a revelation. And I knew from that moment I had to have one of these Commodore computers. And I thought PETs were within reach, but quickly discovered that they were not. But my grandmother had gotten a Commodore 64 to keep the books for the restaurant that they owned. And when I found out that there was actually a Commodore computer that real people could have in their homes, I began a begging process that resulted in getting a Commodore 64 not long after. For me, what was special about the Commodore 64, and the reason I wanted to get it so badly, was because it was a Commodore PET that I could have in my home. I did not realize until later that I was getting an advanced arcade machine. That was just bonus.
The World of Commodore is an annual gathering for Commodore users everywhere to get together and learn and meet other Commodore users. We have vendors selling old and new Commodore peripherals and books and so on. There's game developers, software developers, and collectors all coming together. One thing that we really emphasize at World of Commodore is presentations. We like to get people to get up and talk about their hobby projects. What are their passion projects? What are interesting, cool things are they working on? And they can share that with the community. TPUG is the Toronto Pet Users Group. It's the oldest or second oldest Commodore club still in existence. Started in 1978 or 1979, depending on who you talk to. Was originally a group of PET users, the PET computer from Commodore. And then as Commodore came out with other models of the PET, but also the VIC-20, the Commodore 64, Commodore 128, and then ultimately the Amiga, the same user group grew along with the products. At its peak, it was around 20,000 users.
My name is David Murray, and I'm right here from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. What do I do for a living? I make YouTube videos about old computers. I was just making videos as a hobby. I kind of ran out of topics to talk about, so eventually I started doing like 8-bit related stuff, and people seem to really like it. I've made a number of games for the Commodore 64 over the years. Big releases I've done, of course, is Planet X2, and then Pesky Robots. My first encounter with an actual computer, I was like 6 years old, and that's when my brother decided that he wanted a computer, and my parents took us to the store and we bought a Commodore VIC-20. I don't think I'd ever even seen a computer at that time, at least not that I remember. And I still remember bringing that computer home from the store and setting it up and just being totally mesmerized by, you know, an interactive piece of equipment with a keyboard on it, even though I didn't know how to type and I didn't know what I was going to do on it. We had some games for a VIC-20. You know, we had Omega Race and some things like that. But when we saw my friend's Commodore 64, we were just like blown away. Like the music so much better, the graphics were so much better, and he had a disk drive as well, which we didn't have. So yeah, I think after some begging, I think we got our parents to upgrade us to a Commodore 64, and we started meeting more people at school who also had Commodore 64s, and then we were able to, you know, share software and things like that with them. If you look at 1982 and you look at all the competition out there, to be honest, there weren't really many computers that could compete with the C64 in terms of graphics and sound. We did have the Atari systems that could come pretty close, but other than that, I mean, they were way ahead of, you know, Apple or Sinclair or any of them out there. And at the same time as being better in all these regards, they were actually pretty affordable. So there were a number of iterations of the Commodore 64, but a lot of people don't know it actually started as the Commodore Max. A lot of people have never seen one of these. These are extremely rare, but this is actually, you could call it the original Commodore 64. It's just got a membrane keyboard, and it was really designed to be more of a game console. And it has the same sound chip, video chip, and most of the same architecture as the Commodore 64, but it is missing the RAM. It only has like 2K of RAM. This was discontinued almost as soon as it hit the market, and then they decided to make the C64 as we know it. But yeah, that's where it started.
I was born in 1968. I hate talking about that because it reminds me how old I am. My first encounter would definitely be an arcade machine, and I pretty much remember it being at a kind of a stationery / candy store, which of course as a kid growing up in Yonkers we frequented. All of a sudden there was this machine in the back, quarters, and you could play this game on a TV screen, and I mean, I was hooked immediately. Anytime I got some quarters together, I'd be in front of one of them. Well, leading up to getting a computer, first I had an Atari 2600, like most people at that time frame, and a lot of cartridges. And my parents were interested in getting me a computer, so I started getting computer magazines. And I started looking at all the different systems and comparing them. I actually had a little pad where I was writing everything down, like, okay, a VIC-20, it has this much RAM, it has this many colors, how much were they? Because I knew my parents would not be willing to spend too much money. You know, so I was immediately cutting off like certain machines, like the Apple IIe, way too expensive, the PET, way too expensive, you know, no colors. And I remember while all of this was going on, I was walking up the stairs from our living room. My parents had the TV on, and all of a sudden there was this Commodore 64 commercial. They were talking about this machine, 64K, the colors, the sound, and I just basically stopped on the stairs. I was like, and that pretty much at that point was the machine I wanted. And they ended up buying that one for me. The price had come down a little bit. I never looked back from Commodore.